channel. If you are watching me today, it is probably because of the fact that you love your health, you care about your health, and you desire to keep being healthy all the days of your life. My name is Marilyn, and you are welcome to Health with Marilyn. Today we are going to be talking about a very sensitive topic, a very important topic, which is how to naturally treat insulin resistance, how to naturally take care or reduce insulin resistance in us. We are going to begin by talking about what insulin resistance is. And if you stay with me to the end of this video, you will get to acquire knowledge on how to reverse insulin resistance at home. But before we begin, I would like you to know that every information on this video is merely discussion, and you should never forgo medical advice. For this advice, always endeavor to consult your specialist or your doctor if you are sick. Insulin resistance has been known to claim the lives of many people all over the world. This is because at times it is greatly misunderstood during diagnosis, and also because patients suffering from insulin resistance depend on their medication, but forget that the lifestyle they are living, the activities they take part in, all the type of things that they eat greatly increase the level of insulin resistance in them, or makes the medication or the treatment they are undergoing not to really be effective in their system. Also, people suffering from insulin resistance are made to believe in some areas that insulin resistance is incurable, that the situation cannot be reversed, and this greatly discourages some from taking medication. This equally discourages some from going in for medical advice, from doing research that will help them take care of the situation of insulin resistance in them. So please, I want to state here that if you aren't sure about medical advice, please do not discourage someone you see going in for their treatment, someone who believes in healing, someone who believes that what he or she is doing in order to heal will work. Please do not discourage them. Even if you are a medical practitioner, it is really wrong to discourage someone or speak negatively about a treatment to someone, because it kills the spirit, it kills the willingness to be able to take treatment in some patients. So please, let us be careful the way we share information out here about certain illnesses to patients suffering from it. So we will begin by talking about what insulin is. Insulin is one of the key hormones that maintains glucose in the system. It is formed by the formation of glucose in the pancreas that comes as a result of us eating food that produce glucose in the system. And insulin resistance in the body is caused by the inability of the body to be able to absorb all the insulin produced in the system by the body. This is because when we eat certain foods that produce glucose, which then turns to insulin in our system, at times this insulin does not even get used up, but because of the fact that we keep eating those things that produce glucose in the system, it causes insulin to keep being producing. The body tends to produce more insulin than it really should, and so it causes the insulin not to be able to maintain the level of glucose in the system. It rather tends to be resistant. Right now we are going to look at the causes of insulin resistance, those things that we eat or that lifestyle that we live that causes insulin resistance in our system. The first one is our heavy or high intake of carbohydrates. Overloading the body with carbohydrates leads to a high production of insulin in the system, and this results to insulin resistance in the long run. When carbohydrates enter our body once in a while, the level of insulin produced is moderate, but when it tends to enter our body from time to time, more and more in high quantities, the level of insulin produced in our body is higher than that which our body actually needs. When this happens, it leads to a condition called insulin resistance. It is important for us to note here that insulin resistance leads to a fall in the glucose level of the body, making insulin to lose its ability to support body cells effectively. In Africa, we are known to consume very high portions of carbohydrates. This is due to the fact that most African men tend to do a lot of hard labor, and so they believe that these high carbohydrate foods will replenish the energy they lose every day when they go out to work. But it is equally important for us to note this day that the high levels of carbohydrates that we take in order to be able to have energy to carry out one job or another daily is also negatively affecting our system internally, because when we keep taking it every day, all the time, it leads to insulin resistance. It leads to the overproduction of insulin in the body, causing insulin resistance. The second thing that causes insulin resistance in the system is sugar. This one is commonly known by many of us, but one thing I can tell is that many people just have that as a mind, but they cannot really explain how sugar causes insulin resistance or how sugar is the development of type 2 diabetes in the system. This is because sugar in the system is converted to fructose and glucose. And as we have already explained in the first point, glucose raises insulin resistance when it tends to be overproduced in the system. So we should know that sugar contains 50% fructose and 50% glucose, and overglucose in the system raises insulin, while fructose can only be digested by the liver, and this causes a lot of stress to our liver, causing the overflow of body cells. And when these cells overflow in the system, insulin equally is unable to maintain them. Insulin is unable to control them. And so we see that the compounds found in sugar are a great factor to an individual or a human to have insulin resistance. Glucose from sugar produces insulin, raises the level of insulin, and fructose from sugar stresses the liver, which makes body cells overflow in the system and makes insulin in the system unable to control, to maintain these body cells, and so this leads to insulin resistance, and which in the long run will cause the patient to develop diabetes. The third source of insulin resistance in the system is alcohol. Alcohol causes insulin resistance. So that is one thing that most of us in Africa argue against. You see someone already suffering from insulin resistance or diabetes, but who keeps consuming alcohol, even though the doctor has already told him to avoid alcohol, but they tend to argue that they do not see the relationship between alcohol and insulin resistance, or they do not see the relationship between alcohol and diabetes, because most alcohols, according to them, does not contain sugar because it isn't sweet. But what they do not know is that alcohol in the system is converted to fructose. And as we already know, in our whole body, only the liver has the ability to digest fructose. And when alcohol gets into our system and gets converted to fructose, which is then transported to the liver for digestion, the liver gets stressed while doing it, because there is no other part of the body that can support the liver to digest this fructose, and this leads to the overflow of body cells in the system. The last cause of insulin resistance we will talk about today is starch. Starch causes insulin resistance. This is one information many of us argue. Starch, carbohydrates, we believe do not cause insulin resistance. We believe do not cause diabetes in us. But what we should know today is that they are factors of insulin resistance. This is because just like carbohydrates, when starch enters the body, it is transformed to glucose. And we Africans are high consumers of starch. Just like carbohydrates, we consume starch in very high quantities. And so we should know that when starch in high quantities enter our system, that is equally how glucose is produced in high quantities in the system. That is also how insulin is produced in a very high amount in the system, and this leads to insulin resistance, because an increase in the level of production in glucose causes insulin spikes in the system. And so reason why starch is a factor of insulin resistance. Now we are going to look at what we can do naturally to reverse the situation of insulin resistance. One thing I want you to know is that the causes of insulin resistance, when reversed, will lead to solutions that we need in order to reverse insulin resistance in us. We already said high levels of carbohydrates produces glucose, which increases the level of insulin production in the system, which therefore means that taking moderate portions of carbohydrates, reducing the level of carbohydrate intake in us, will reverse the situation of insulin resistance. Completely avoiding alcohol or taking alcohol in moderation will reverse the situation of insulin resistance. Avoiding artificial sugar will reduce the level of insulin resistance. Also, avoiding high consumption of starch will reduce the level of insulin resistance. Also, fasting is a very great way of reversing insulin resistance in us. This is because when we fast, we eat nothing. When we fast, we add nothing into our system in the form of carbohydrates, in the form of starch, in the form of alcohol, in the form of sugar. And when all of this is absent in us, when there is no increase of any of this in us, it causes the already present insulin in our body to be able to get used, and this reverses the situation of insulin resistance. So it is very important for us to always fast, not only for spiritual reasons, but also for the sake of our health. Equally, consuming salmon or mackerel fish will help reverse the situation of insulin resistance in us. This is because salmon and mackerel fish are very high in omega-3 acids, and omega-3 acids in the system are a good source of protein, and they equally support the functioning of the liver. So it is important that we increase the intake of salmon and mackerel in the system. So that's that for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching up to this moment. I hope this was able to enlighten you on how you could equally handle the situation of insulin resistance at home while you consult and get followed up by a specialist in the hospital. Please do support our video by giving us a thumbs up, by subscribing to our channel, and by leaving a comment in the comment section. That will help us see how helpful this video was to you, and equally help us answer certain worries that you might have. See you next time.